Good afternoon. It's Friday, and another week is starting to wrap up, getting ready to head into a holiday weekend. But before we do, it's time to talk video. I don't think we've talked any video, guys, leading since we've started really heavily. I mean, obviously, we have a lot of video relationships with what we're doing gear-wise, but dedicated to the topic of video. Usually it's us picking on the LED wall. It's too noisy, it's too big. I still stick by all those, by the way. But it's time for us to embrace the technology, right? To understand what those in the other departments where we have that relationship and we intersect. And with LED walls now really becoming the new scenic, right? We see more and more of that now, whether it's the walls, whether it's floors. Used to be, Mac, when we were hanging our PAs, everybody would tell us, as long as you stay out of image, you know, if you're into scenic a little, that's okay. Now, if I got a speaker that's, 1 pixel into the, tile of an LED wall, they're all over me because I'm in the image. Where it's like, well, the entire wall's an image. What do you want me to do, right? And it's 160 feet wide by 50 feet tall. It also does a really nice job of blocking RF. We'll hear from Bethany about, a lot of the great strides that technology has made. But I think the idea of today's session is around helping us to understand and maybe in the case of myself from an audio perspective, learn to know what I didn't know. And to I don't think I'm going to be changing careers anytime soon. So everybody in video can be thankful for that. Coming and mucking things up there. But before we move on, Pete, Mac, it's good to see you guys. Another Friday. Let's talk about kind of Q&A. Mac is our official Q&A briefer, right? He's gotten quite good at this, Bethany, over the past weeks, and he's very succinct now. Some might even say perhaps a little angry every so often, and it's awesome.
I'll try to rein the anger in. I will say I'm looking forward to this because I currently do embrace LED. One of my periodic gigs is working on a late night television show when they go on remotes. And loading in scenic used to be a 2 to 3 day load in where very little else could happen because they were in the way of everything. And the last time we did it, they've gone over to complete LED scenic, except for platforms for the band and the host. And load-in took most of 1 day. And while it does create the problem of you have to have antennas behind the LED and in front of the LED because they don't work through the LED, that's a pretty small problem to deal with as long as you know it's going to be there. You just plan ahead and you do it that way, and it's fine. So I'm all for it. But as far as Q&A goes, in your GoToWebinar control panel, there's a little pull down that says questions. And if you open that up at the bottom, there will be a box for you to type a question in. Only we will see those questions. They are not seen by the rest of the attendees. Whether you're asking a question or making a comment, it just goes to us. We will try to get to every question, and certainly we'll try to get to every topic if we can't get to every question in the time allotted. But please be specific in your question because chances of it being answered or noticed immediately are slim to none. So it will be answered some time later, and it may not be clear what you're referring to if you're not specific. But we will get to everything, and please ask your questions. That's what this is really all about. Everybody learning as much as they can from this experience. So I think that's it on Q&A. Pete?
Speaking of learning what you can from this, if during the show you get an idea for a show that you'd like us to do, please just throw it in the questions thing, preface it with #idea, and we'll put it in our ideas list. And every month we have this giant rolling bin that we roll around, and we pull out numbers until somebody yells bingo, and then that's when we do the show. So go ahead and do it. We'll have more time also at the end of the show for you to do that if you are so engrossed, which I'm sure you will be with Bethany's presentation, that you forget forget your entire life. And I will be too. I love LEDs. I think they're the best thing since sliced bread, and sliced bread just goes bad on the stage. So Bethany, it's all you.
All right. Let me go ahead and get.
And Bethany, before you start, I do want to say thanks for coming on. You know, I didn't do a proper introduction of you. I apologize. You're part of the family. Dropped you right in to everything. But you know, obviously we've worked together on a number of different corporate events over the years, and to me, you know, I really appreciate how you're very big on collaboration, and you've always, anytime we ever had a challenge or an opportunity, you always have helped me be able to find out how to find success from what I need to do from an audio perspective, as well as still meet what our customers' expectations are visually. So I didn't want to just jump into this and people had no idea that, you know, obviously feel free to share your background as you want, but I want to say thanks for the years we've worked together in the field, and we will be back together in the field in another week or so, or probably a little longer than that. But now I seem to have lost Bethany for a moment. So stand by. There we go. You're back. I'm going to hop off, shut up, and go right ahead, Bethany.
I think Bethany just turned off her camera. That's the only thing.
Okay, good. So she's good to go.
Okay, it's up to you, Bethany. Go for it.
Okay, sorry, I lost audio there for a minute. Kelly, thanks for the words, and thanks for asking me to be a part of this. I'm thrilled and flattered to be here. My name is Beth Forbes. I have been in the production industry for about 18 years and have found all kinds of pockets to hide myself in. I currently lean toward technical project management, technical direction, and the concentration that I generally gravitate toward is video and LED. It's where a lot of my technical background is. I am going to go ahead and just start from the ground up with LED to kind of dumb it down. One of the things that you probably noticed in the title of this webinar is Legos that light up, which, yes, it's funny, but to me, that's how you simplify things. If any of you have worked with me, you know that we can get ourselves into crazy, complex, complicated situations, and we have to find solutions. And a lot of times, bringing perspective to those situations helps. And so I try to do that. And one of the things that I've always told people when we're having problems with the LED is, well, at the end of the day, they're just Legos that light up. And it kind of cuts the stress level down. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and just get started with an introduction to LED. And if anybody has wondered what exactly LED stands for, it is a light emitting diode. So LED is a cross between a light and a piece of video gear. If you have ever worked with projection, a projection surface is merely that. It's a surface. It is a piece of muslin or fabric of some sort that is capturing an image being sent to it by a big flashlight, so to speak, a projector. This is a little different. LED emits light. It doesn't reflect it, it emits it. So technologically, there's some things that you run into there with it being a scenic background or being the star of the show, for lack of a better way to put it. When you talk about LED, you're always going to hear, there's going to be a lot of plug words, right? Or hotkeys, if you will, which pixel is one, and aspect ratio, all those things that we always talk about when it comes to LED walls, or really anything when it comes to video. When you look at an LED diode or an LED pixel itself, there are 3 diodes in it. And I'm going to go ahead and just jump forward real quick. Actually, no, I'm not, sorry. We're gonna get into the pixel makeup in and of itself and go kind of deep dive into diodes here in a little bit. But I wanted to go broadly address where and how LED is used in our industry and others. LED cross platforms, just like audio, video, and lighting. Production professionals obviously see them mostly rigged and flown or ground supported in ballrooms, convention centers, trade show floors, things like that. There are tours, of course, that are nothing but LED when it comes to video systems or video displays. Permanent installations is another thing. If you look at the bottom corner of this slide, that's New York City, that's Times Square. Quite a bit of LED. The wallpaper of Times Square is LED walls. And then obviously architectural. If you ever walk into the lobby of Google or Facebook or any of those larger office complexes and even local ones, chances are they've got some LED hanging in there. It is an investment that companies have used to do large scale, high definition marketing on. And it's transformed lobbies all across the world as far as how people brand and share their brand kind of at their front door. I want to talk a little bit about the history of LED. LED didn't always present itself as a super easy, high-end, beautiful product that we show up, dump a truck, and 4 hours later have a football field of LED hanging off of the truss. It wasn't always that easy. A lot of us who have been dealing with LED for years understand that now, these days, we're spending half the time building and teching walls that we used to, or a fraction of the time. And not to mention, we don't feel like we lifted weights for 2 hours halfway through the build either. The products have gotten lighter. They've gotten cooler, as in it doesn't take as much power to run them, so they don't heat up as bad. They've gotten easier to program and easier to color and easier to manipulate. Some of your first LED tiles were not that easy to color or change or manipulate. Color matching tile by tile was a process. Many LED techs from back in the Barco NX4 days or the Barco C5 days or all those big heavy old LED products, they can explain what staring at an LED wall on full white for hours and hours and hours on end trying to make the tiles match. These days, it's a couple clicks of the button, a file is loaded, and they all match 9 times out of 10. Yeah, you've got a glitch here and there, but things have gotten easier, not just in the hardware, but in the mechanics and the engineering. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I wanted to pull up a then and now picture on your screen. If you look on the right side, you're going to see that Barco NX4 tile that I explained, and on the bottom, you're going to see what looks like a road case full of processing gear. On the right side, or on the left side of your screen, you're going to be looking at the back side of a row CB3 tile, and above it, a 2RU space unit, which is the processor for that wall. Obviously, things have changed. Things have gotten smaller, sleeker, lighter, more technically capable. It doesn't take a Buick strapped to the back of an LED wall to process that image and play the picture. It takes far less, actually. So I just wanted to kind of touch on the history of LED. Back in the heavier, harder days, LED walls were not as predominant as they are now. As a producer or as a technical liaison, you had to understand the investment of the LED wall when you're looking at this Barco NX4. And it goes everywhere from how many trucks it's going to take to get it all there, right down to the power and where, for heaven's sake, am I going to put all the infrastructure behind it? Because that's a large chunk of backstage space. So there was a lot more budget needed for it. The labor alone was a large investment to hang an LED wall. Used to be you'd walk into the auto show majors and the walls were much smaller. And part of it was you couldn't afford to build big ones. It wasn't even financially possible. You'd blow your budget. And so all of those considerations have been part of why and how LED has technologically advanced itself to the point where it's quite modular, it's lightweight, it doesn't take much time or effort to get it put up. Your ceiling load capacity has now been given back a little bit, or a bunch actually. It can hang far more versatilely than it used to. So that's one reason why you're starting to see all of these giant LED walls. You know, scenic is an investment as well, and we're going to talk about how LED and other concentrations match up. So I don't want to go there too deep, but you know, one of Kelly's biggest questions to me was, why are they so big? Well, one reason they're so big these days is they're affordable. They weren't always affordable. They cost an arm and a leg to hang, and a small army of people. So just a touch on that. I want to talk about a case study when it comes to LED then and now. And if any of you know me, you know that I have a history of being on the auto show majors tours, managing cases and logistics, but also having my hand on product. Pictured here is the Cadillac booth. Now, this was a booth that I was part of the Blue Water team to execute for about 2.5 years straight. This was the Cadillac display for the majors. So that's Detroit, Chicago, New York, and LA. This is a 260-degree concave tilted wall. And I'll say it again, 260 degrees, concave in structure, tilted. When this booth and this piece of equipment is being built, we always called it the roller coaster. It took a major piece of machinery to set the pylons up. And then we had a motorized system that took chunks of this wall up. When we started this booth, the product we used was the Barco C5 tile. For those of you that are not familiar with it, the Barco C5 tile is about 13 inches square. It's about 2.5 to 3 inches deep, and it weighs about 40 pounds of tile. So you can imagine the weight of this wall and the amount of tile slinging that it took. The first time we built this wall on the auto show floor took us about 16 hours. Part of it was the mechanics on the display group's side needed a little tweaking too. You know, it was the first time for everything. Part of it was the daggone thing was so dang heavy and hard to put together. Barco C5 has a very difficult time curving. And so you can imagine a 260-degree concave wall is a piece of work, not to mention the seaming that comes into play. Seaming is a big deal when it comes to LED. You got to get the tiles to line up, otherwise your picture is crap, basically. Now, as we went on, this build took less time. We got it down to about 10 hours. Had this been engineered and made to work with some of the newer tiles that are same size, but much more modular, lightweight, and technologically savvy, so to speak, this wall would have taken a fraction of time to build. Not to mention it would have taken a fraction of the weight and power as well. There were times with this wall that the structure would heat up to a point where some of the attachments would fall off because the glue was starting to melt, or the backside of it was so warm that when you walked back on that caged infrastructure, you worked up a sweat about halfway through. So that's just a case study to show you how different and how advanced we've become, and in a very short amount of time. Just a few years. I mean, this you're looking at a structure that was built in 2015-16. So not very long ago were we still using some of those older tiles, and now we're slinging tiles in a fraction of the time. I want to talk about pixel pitch for a minute, because this is going to open a little bit of a can of worms and kind of create a little bit of an opportunity to discuss a couple things during Q&A. Pixel pitch, the definition of pixel pitch actually is the distance between the pixels. So if you look down on the bottom left-hand corner, that picture that you see is the little red bracket is showing you from center of pixel 1 to center of pixel 2 is 4.8 millimeters. That's where you get, this is a 4 mil wall. So if I have a 24 mil wall, obviously I have a ton less pixels, but they're quite a bit farther apart. The higher your pitch is the closer the distance between pixels. The lower the pitch, the farther away they get. So the numbers kind of counterbalance one another. So if I have a 3 mil wall, there's 3 millimeters worth of space. If I have a 24 mil wall, there's a lot more space. Where we come into how do I thoughtfully pick pixel pitch has a lot to do with what the show is about, how the LED is being used, and what pictures are going to be on it. So for example, you will find shows where dead center there is an LED wall behind the stage, and then you've got outboards or the walls that go out beyond the stage itself to create that experience. Generally speaking, a lot of choices can be made to put a higher pitch, lower pixel space behind the speaker and go with a larger pitch outside, and that can work. That's done quite often. There's a couple of benefits to that we're going to talk about later when we start to get into how LED affects both audio, video, and sometimes lighting. But understand that your higher pixel pitch is going to be a much sharper image. So if your cream of the crop imaging and picture and story is on that center screen, then by all means spend your buck there and go cheaper on the outboards. If it's all important, you got to find that balance, right? We all do. We've all budgeted shows or been a part of it. And you just got to kind of make thoughtful decisions when it comes to what to put where, just like PA, just like lighting, all just like video as well. If you look up in the upper right-hand corner, this is where I wanted to wait to talk to you about diodes, because there's a little bit better picture of diode placement inside the pixel itself. Inside a pixel are 3 diodes. RGB, red, green, blue. Very similar to everything else we've experienced in video. Now, the earliest LEDs did not have blue diodes. The blue diodes didn't come around until much later in LED's design. And no blue diode is the same as another. Reds and greens tend to stay consistent. Your blues are going to be all over the map. So when you start to see or hear people talking about version 1 or generation 1 or generation 3 of a tile, the reason why we talk about it that way is if I have, let's say I have a generation 1 row tile or unilumin tile and a generation 3 unilumin tile. These two products cannot build the same wall. Their blue diodes are too far apart and you won't be able to color match them. Now, can I have a Rev 1 in the middle and 2 Rev 2s or 2 Rev 3s on the outboards? I'm going to answer this tentatively. You can, but again, thoughtful decisions need to be made because, again, your outboards will not match your center. Kelly, you and I were involved in a show where this very thing was a challenge, and we got it. We figured out a way to make it happen. And kudos to that client and that vendor for coming to the table and getting creative and solving the problem, because that's what we do as technicians. That's what we do as people. That's what we do as producers. That's what we do as gear vendors. But that there's a little bit of a play there where you never want to mix generations, and a lot of that has to do with those blue pixels. When you're staring at an LED wall, there are probably thousands of different blue diodes in that LED wall, not 1,000 of the same. And that gives you a little bit of license, but it also gives you a little bit of limitation. And we're going to talk about that. But when coloring walls, one of the hardest colors to match is blue. And that's exactly why, is you're dealing with a fruit salad of blues within these tiles themselves. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about aspect ratios and mapping and how graphics and LED play together. This is a big deal and something that a lot of people may or may not have a ton of information on. And I'm no genius. I'm still learning too. So I am going to admit I needed to run my thoughts by a couple of people that are way smarter than me to make sure that I was going to be touching on the right things. So I want to talk a little bit about aspect ratio to start. Aspect ratio, what is it? It's the width of an image to the height of an image. So when you hear people say 16:9 or 1920 by 1080 or 3840 by 2160, those are aspect ratios. what those numbers are, because I just shot out about a list of 6 or 7 that maybe you don't know. Those are the numbers of side to side and top to bottom. So your 3840, your 3840 is 30, or 3480, sorry. Your 3480 is pixel 1 in the bottom left-hand corner to pixel 3840 or 3480. Get it right, Beth. In the bottom right corner. It's how many pixels are across. The 2160 is how many from top to bottom. So that's where you get your aspect ratio. Your resolution is the number of pixels displayed on an LED wall or a substrate of any kind. So if I have that many pixels in the wall, obviously the picture is going to be better. So the higher the resolution, the more pixels are in there, and the better the image is going to be, the better your end product is going to be. A couple of things, like let's talk, if I'm a graphic designer and this is my first, do a little light stretching, this is my first project with an ultra wide or a large high resolution LED wall. A couple of things that they need, that they're going to need from whoever is providing this LED wall is the pixel space. So they're going to need the aspect ratio. What is the pixel, or what is the aspect ratio, so they can do some math and understand exactly what palette they're working on. Once they have that resolution, the goal is to create the imagery that fits that picture. And from presentation machine to end substrate, it should fit together like a glove. There are custom resolutions out there. There are, fancy shapes and sizes to some of these walls. And that, again, is where the graphic designer and the gear provider then come together and discuss what the overall picture or the overall zip code is, or real estate is, and then what is the image space. And that's where those discussions can be far more collaborative and conversational. A couple other things to talk about when you're talking about graphics and LED is on-camera imaging. Okay, this is going to bleed a little bit into how video is affected by LED, but it also affects graphics. So if I have a presenter on stage that has a higher pitch wall behind him, and he's standing more than 10 feet away, we'll get into that. It's important that that graphic designer understands what his product is going to look like on that end substrate. How is the color going to change? A lot of LED walls, you can look at the graphic in the back and see. I've had a show where the graphics that they showed up with was an indigo color, much like the lower left-hand corner of this tile or of this slide. And that's a tough one to take from a media server and translate it over into an LED wall. Purple's a tough color to match, especially when it's generated differently at the media server versus the LED processor. They tend to get a little bit more blue. Other tiles air green, some tiles air orange. Their backs are different, and we can go into all of that. But color is something a graphics designer is also going to need to understand. Is one thing you could do as a technical director or a producer, or even as the vendor, is if I'm the graphic designer and they tell me this is going to be a row CB5 wall, one of the first things I'm going to go do is research that tile and understand what my design how it's going to be translated into LED. And I might be able to build in some safety nets or some handles there that we can collaborate on, where I have the ability to affect the picture on site easily, so that it's not all up to the LED processor and coloring to meet me where I'm at. So there's some of those opportunities that are built in there too. All right, AV and LED. I want to talk about how AV and LED meet, how LED affects audio, how LED affects video, and how LED affects lighting. I'm going to start in its own zip code. So I'm going to start with how LED and video match up. There's some challenges when it comes to LED that need to be very, very well addressed when staging a show or figuring out how to assist your speakers in telling their story to their audiences and making that an experience that's worthwhile, high quality, and well thought out. One of the things that we come into a lot with LED, and not as much these days, because again, it's more affordable. We can put a 1 mil or a 3 mil wall behind a speaker. It wasn't always that easy. And sometimes you don't get that luxury. Sometimes it's an 8, 10, 12, 14, 24 mil wall behind them. And we have to learn and understand how that's going to affect the product. One of the things that you're going to hear is moire. What is moire? Moire is the effect of an LED product in the lens of a camera. So if you've got a speaker that's standing too close to this LED wall, it's going to look very strange in the end picture. So your IMAG image is going to look, hard to explain, but you'll know it when you see it. It almost makes the human look floating and the wall looks very strange. An easy fix to that is you bring that speaker downstage. If you put distance between a speaker and an LED wall, your camera doesn't have to search so far, and it doesn't have to process both the LED and the speaker that closely together. It kind of fades into the background, so to speak. That's one example of how video and LED meet up, and there are a ton of them. With the way that LED is being used these days, you're coming into a lot more ultra wide and custom sized walls, where your aspect ratios and resolutions are different. You get into having screen controllers as part of the mix. You have to put an E2 or a spider in to be able to make all of the pieces talk to that ultra wide screen. There are a lot of screen control and switching systems out there that are limited by the aspect ratios and resolutions of these walls, because it has to process and be fed the image differently. And that's where those high-res switchers come in. You know, you get into 4K and all those buzzwords that we can sit here and talk about for the next 3 days. But that's again a very clear issue when it comes to LED, or not issue, it's just a thing when it comes to LEDs. Okay, like Kelly said, it's solid LED. Where do I put my PA? Well, it's solid LED. How do we put the picture on there, and how do we utilize that real estate creatively and give versatility to the speaker, the audience, the graphics designers, and the content managers? So how do we build in ways to get creative with it? When you get into audio, there's a couple of different interferences. Right before we got on here, Pete and Kelly and Mac and I discussed how a lot of these older products used to give you a hum. And a lot of that had to do with the way that the tiles themselves were generating images. A lot of it was localized on the back of the tile. A lot of it had to do with power. There was amperage in those walls that was significantly higher than what it is now. There's a lot of different things that it went into play, but a lot of that's gone away. Most, if not all of it's gone away, unless you're using a tile or a product that's older, possibly a little outdated, okay, cheaper, you know, all those things. Another thing that these giant football fields of LED make an audio guy cringe about is RF. You still got to get that antenna in front of this wall. And where the heck are you going to put it if the wall is 500 feet long by 60 feet tall, or 300 feet long by 60 feet tall? As a TD, I've come into these situations where I have to be very intentional about telling my audio crew, look, you got to put that antenna dead center upstage on the front court of that truss to get ahead of that LED wall and not lose your footage or your reach on that coax. There's been situations where, you know, you sit there scratching your head and go, hindsight's 2020, now what? And that's not a good place to be for any of us. We don't like that. But those are some things to consider when you start looking at your next project and you see giant LED wall and you understand that A2 land is back off stage left is okay, but I got to get on the ball. The first thing I got to focus on is where to put that antenna. And hopefully you and your team have the time and the resources to do it when the time comes. Couple other things is the lighting challenges. You know, there's a lot that goes on with lighting. They're creating a stage wash. Well, it used to be a scenic background with a projection screen above it or something to that nature. Now there is a giant light emitting source behind the speaker. So your lighting designer is going to have to take that into consideration prior to show site, of course, in his or her design. And why is because he or she is going to have to change the way they do their stage wash and change the way that they set up that wash and where the lights are placed in order to counterbalance that backlight, basically. You know, as TDs and producers, we have to understand that lighting focus is going to involve the LED team. So you got to keep your crews on. The LED wall has to be lit in order for the stage wash and the lighting team to do what they need to do in order to marry those two products up. So there are some, it even affects the labor end of concentrations when it comes to this. Again, speaker placement and blocking considerations. Not only are you figuring out how to put a human in front of a picture, but you're putting a human in front of a picture that emits light and is pixelated and can challenge cameras. I mean, it's a complex thing. So how deep do you build your stage, Mr. Scenic Designer? How close or intimate is that panel going to have to be on the stage in order to stay far enough away to where moire isn't an option, isn't really a concern. You know, brightness is another one. These walls you can turn up and turn down at a moment's notice, and a lot of it is you've got handles on that. When you look at a concert, you know as well as I do that stuff is running at 100%. But in a ballroom, probably more like 30 or 40%. 40 is even high, to be honest. That's how many handles we have on these walls. And it's not 80 degrees in the back now. But if you had a giant LED wall and it was running at 50% or better, that sucker's gonna warm up, or it used to. Now you can have football fields of this stuff flown at 60%, and you're not gonna have to crank the air handlers on to keep that ballroom cool for your attendees and your speakers. So it affects everything. Just like everything affects everything else, LED is no exception. I want to talk about latency, because this is a thing, right? This is getting a little bit into engineering and how LED walls kind of differ from some of the other technologies. If you look at this slide, you're looking at, for lack of a better way to put it, a path. And if you think about, I think about it as a road trip, okay? So, and follow with me. If you talk about the signal path between the playback source and the end product, so playback source and LED wall, or playback source and the PA, this is where audio and video marry up. And how do we make sure that the lips are moving and the sound matches it? Well, like I said to Kelly, Mac, and Peter, this is where audio saves the video guy. I know, I said it. It's okay. Think about this as a road trip, okay? So audio is going to be the dude in this situation, and video is going to be the chick or the girl. I shouldn't say those words, but so I know from my own experience that most of the time, the men I know in my life will get behind the wheel, and it is locked and loaded until you get there, right? When you put a woman or kids in the car, you're gonna make more stops. And that's the analogy I have. So with video, there's more stops along the way from point A to point B than audio has. Audio's infrastructure from playback source to console, or honestly PA, doesn't have near as many stops as video. Independent on your scenario or your engineering setup from video, it could be more than the steps that I'm showing you on this screen. But let's get down and dirty. So on video, you got your playback source, whether that's MIDI, Playback Pro, D3, whatever you're using for playback, okay? So you got your playback source. So the dude hits the space bar, your technician hits the space bar, and off goes the video. That video then travels to a router, into a switcher, into an E2 Spider, a high-res screen control device, likely. And along the way, there might be a scaler converter. This is where you start
Beth, oh, I'm not hearing you.
I think we lost her audio.
Yeah, Beth, I'm not hearing
A1
you.
comes in, dons his, you're not?
Yeah, I haven't been hearing you
Let,
for about the last 30 seconds. You may want to turn your camera off
yeah,
to,
let me turn my camera off.
yeah, to lighten the stream load.
All right, how's that, Mac? Is that a little better?
There we go.
Yeah, hearing you
All
now.
right. Okay, great. I'm gonna back up just a little bit. So if you look at this, this is kind of like a road trip, right? You got one with kids, one with the wife and kids, one not. There's a few more potty stops on the way, so to speak. Same thing with video engineering. From the source to the actual substrate, so playback to LED wall, there are more stops along the way. So the playback device, let's say let's say you're feeding this wall from a D3 playback server. D3 technician hits the space bar, off goes the timeline. From that system, that signal then goes to a router or a DA of some kind. From there, it goes into a switcher. From there, it goes likely into a high-res screen control device and is converted or scaled along the way. All of these things require a 2 to 3 frame delay. You lose frames in the timing. So now the timing that the audio system has is different from the timing that the video system has. This is where the A1 dons his cape, as I was saying, and swoops in and fixes it. This is where we rely on the A1 to be able to adjust in milliseconds the delay so that his sound meets our video at the exact right moment to where the experience for the attendee or the consumer is pristine. And it's something that A1 may have to play with in order to get it right. When it's right, it's right. These things don't necessarily change because your signal path is the same throughout a show. So getting there is all about timing. And that's, again, like I said, that's where I've always said where audio saves the videos, the video guys. I want to kind of pull back out a little bit and just talk about how LED shines, pun intended. LED has taken our immersive experience in whether it's a ballroom or a trade show, and it's kind of turned the volume up, so to speak. These pictures are amazing. They're so much farther ahead of where we were 10, 15, 20 years ago with what we could deliver as far as a pictorial product to our audiences. They're beautiful. They're shiny, they're bright, they're crisp, their resolutions are high. It's allowed us to gain real estate in a room because if we can afford the LED wall, we don't have to have such a big throw distance for front or rear projection. I mean, there's so many benefits to it, but the spectacle and experience is truly something that I know, as having been an event designer, a producer, a technical director, and a project manager in this industry, that if you can afford the bright, shiny diamond, everyone wants to afford the bright, shiny diamond. And that's where LED can sometimes be the star of the show, is that it is this wonderful substrate to tell your story on. It's versatile. It's lightweight. These days, it doesn't take a ton of power. The cabling on it is lighter at times. I mean, there's just so many different wonderful things about it, both from somebody having to rent it or put it up or be the one to manage the build, to the person that walks in the ballroom and sees this amazing environment that these big walls create. Kelly kicked this off talking about how it's the new scenic, and it is. But imagine you can have 17 different scenic designs in one show because you've turned it into imagery. There was a show that I was a part of with my friends at 10Q and my beloved LMG, where we went into a golf course in the middle of Napa Valley and turned the end of a tent into an LED wall. And it created a brilliant picture. That design, that creativity that 10Q brought to the table, married with, yes, the scenic vendor that was there and their ability to meet our LED product, our LMG's LED product, really created this unbelievable environment inside of a tent. You could make it look like the room kept going. You could make it look like we were staring at, the outdoors or the golf course. Just so many different options. You know, if you look at even the pictures in this slide itself, you can see how the environments have changed, how you can use it to make you know, the Chevy bow tie in the on the auto show floor. That was the Chevy booth that I did with Blue Water years ago. You could make it look like you're walking into a field of flowers, like that lower picture. Scenic also takes a lot of time to build, and these days LED goes together really quick. They're Legos that light up. So you can see that the technology itself has come to a place where it's offering just so many more options. You know, instead of one paintbrush, you've got 7. There's a lot of freedom in that, and your build goes faster. You know, you're hanging PA as the LED wall goes up, as opposed to wait for the scenic to go in, then we got to hang the stuff, and on and on and on. Projection is also used still, and sometimes matches up in shows where you've got LED and projection. Those are some scenarios where you got to get thoughtful again, where, you know, how do you make those two products not fight against each other but work together? You know, projection, it in a way could be 6 in one, half a dozen in the other when it comes to build time and labor. But there again, you know, LED provides a little bit more as far as what you can do. Now, can you afford it all the time? Of course not. Projection is still a beautiful product to fly and use as your storytelling device. LED is also very versatile. You know, there are most of the products that you're seeing these days can curve much easier. They can be put into cubes. You know, there are so many products out there and product lines that have created corner tiles to where you can actually build a cube or a circle or anything you want around it. The way that these rig is way easier. The bumpers or the devices that you would attach to the truss that then attaches the tile to the truss used to be a whole lot more complicated and far more difficult to make that first row happen. These days, first rows don't take very much, depending on the product. Some do, some don't. Depends on what you're doing. Depends on how big it is. But you are looking at a lot of conveniences when it comes to LED. Yeah, there's a price tag for that, but it kind of makes itself up in different ways at times. A couple of some considerations that I wanted to talk about prior to deploying LED. So whether I'm a vendor, a production rigger, a TD, a producer, a venue, whoever I am, there are considerations. Rigging is a big one. You know, that ceiling can only hold so much, and there's only so many I-beams we can hit. Some of these tiles, while lighter than they used to be, are still significantly heavy. It's how big can your wall be? There have been times where in my LMG career, between LMG being a thoughtful partner and the client, they came up with a way to combine both flown and ground supported structures, literally landing half the wall onto its ground support. So a ballroom could have a giant LED wall in it, but that ballroom couldn't handle all of the capacity. So they married them together. It was brilliant. Not easy, well done though. You know, you get into some of these larger scale things and your production riggers are really going to have to get specific with your LED provider or your technicians or TD in order to understand just how heavy is this sucker. If I scroll back in my my presentation, there's a picture of the Chevy booth that I did with Blue Water for the Detroit Auto Show majors. Actually, it was at all 4, but there's a very large 8mm wall dead center in the back of this booth, weighed 13,000 pounds. And there were, in 2 of the cities, we couldn't fly the wall on truss. There was no doing that. The rigging team had to bring in you've all seen them, the giant towers, and had to pull it up with that. Even then, adding extra motors when they thought they had enough and didn't. Just the wall was that heavy between cabling and the tiles themselves. There are ways around it. Like I mentioned, ground supports. A lot of these tiles, these products now come with just extremely easy and very, very well engineered ground supports. Didn't used to be as easy to ground support an LED wall as it is now. So I think we're a little spoiled now with ground supports, but it's certainly a treat when you come to the point where you can't handle the capacity, but you still can afford and want to do LED. You got to look into some of those ground support options. Some other considerations: how are they best going to be utilized? Are we creating an environment that doesn't necessarily need scenic? I was on a show earlier this year with LG, working as a project manager for LNG, where the producers of that show needed scenic pieces to mesh with our LED in order to create the environment so that LG could sell their appliances and their wine cooler and the window shade TV. I can't remember what it's called. But we had to have both. So where are the considerations, both budgetally and how do we put it together so that we can all play nice in that sandbox? Power considerations. While these LED walls don't take as much power as they used to, they still take a chunk of power. So where are we going to get it? How much do we need to share? How much do I have available in that ballroom that I can divvy up between audio, video, lighting, and LED? Because now you're not budgeting for 3 concentrations, you've got 4. You've got a 4th one. There's just a number of different things to consider. You know, graphically, how do I best utilize this wall so that if, let's say I have an environment where I've got 3 different products or 2 different products in the room. I've been on shows where, you know, your dead center wall is going to air green and the outboards are going to air blue with different blacks. How do you, as a graphic designer and a producer, how do we get thoughtful about, one, how do we collaboratively get proactive about that, but then how do we then plan for that scenario so it doesn't work against us in the end? In the end, all of our concentrations, every last product that's brought into a ballroom or a convention center is what I like to call crap on wheels, until brilliant-minded people collaborate to bring something together to be an experience and a product that is literally, undeniably something to remember. And that's what that's what we want to do here. So there are a lot of things to consider when LED walls are, you know, on the table. Do we use it? Don't we use it? You know, what's the star of the show? And where do we need to make sure we keep money happening? You know, you never want to sacrifice your PA in order to have an LED wall hanging, because it won't matter if the LED wall is brilliant, they won't be able to hear anything. So there's all of those things. You know, budget is a thing for any show that gets designed. Anyway, that's kind of where I'm at. I went ahead and just slid a Q&A slide in there. So I'm ready when you guys are.
Excellent. Hey, Pete. So I see a few coming in there on this. You're muted, buddy.
I think some of these questions really are a discussion we had on another show. How do you sync up a live person on the stage with the video on an IMAG screen and make it work for the audience? Well, you can't, because it works for one distance from the stage. Let's say the front row or the middle of the house or the back of the house, because every foot distance from the live PA is another millisecond of delay.
Yeah, that has to do with syncing up the audio, but I think the question was about the video, because if you see a live person on stage and you see them behind themselves on IMAG, when they move their arms, they're out of sync because of the frame delay that's going through all the video processing before it gets to the screen. And really the only thing you can do about that is optimize the video path to be as fast as possible. You know,
and
reduce
never
the
put
amount of
IMAG
processing.
behind somebody.
Yeah, and that because it's in every, and it's not unique to LED. It's any video IMAG is going to have that. It's just part of what happens in the video chain. There is the delay that Beth described earlier, that we could sync up the audio to the video, but you can't sync up the video to the video to the live.
Right. Yeah, you're gonna get it no matter what substrate is behind them. You know, whatever the picture is showing, that's part of live recording and camera work as well. I mean, you know, put IMAG out there.
Yeah, exactly.
I had a
One
question.
of my questions I had were, go ahead, Pete.
Go ahead, Kelly. Go.
My question was around processor latency time. Do you have like just a rough budget for us audio people that you could say, okay, a wall processor that's, you know, made in the last 2 or 3 years, you know, is about X frames, or like the path you showed, that was really, really excellent. You know, how you showed that sequence of devices, right? Can you maybe help us understand the budget that we need to, meaning, you know,
Yeah,
or latency?
and if I don't, for those of you that are watching that are video experts that are smarter than me, I might say something that's not correct. I admit it. It's fine. The way I understand it, and I may not know all of the details, but it's not just the processor. It's the entire
Correct.
video head end that has to be considered. Now you've got some better high end processors these days that do their job far better than the older ones. You know, you've got brands like Brompton and Novastar. There's other ones out there. Those are the two that I'm primarily more familiar with these days, that are going to be your sexier, faster processors. It also deals with, you're also dealing with what's the resolution? Are we in 4K? Because then you've got even more video infrastructure in the back. If you think about it, each stop, or most of the stops, is a frame in the video system. It is important as engineers that we make sure the audio team has a very good conversation with your EIC or your engineer in charge. He's going to understand how many stops are along the way. He's going to help you better determine how many milliseconds you're going to have to make up for at the console for each thing. I mean, you know, depending on how the infrastructure is, you might not have to do that for every last thing that hits the screen. Graphics might be different than PowerPoint. Graphics might be different than playback. IMAG might be different than something else. It's just he's gonna better let you know how many stops you have to allocate for it.
Yeah, that's usually my first person I go to have a conversation with during load in is, you know, what is the switching that you're using on this?
Yeah.
What is the wall? And can you give me a rough estimate of my latency I need, or number of frames, right? And then I'll use the console to, you know, do my delay and go, okay, I'll set it to delay for frames and do that math. Pete, I saw a few interesting questions that were coming in around this.
One of them from Gary Weiss is how does the color temperature, how can you control the color temperature?
It depends on the product and it depends on the processor. If you're using something, I'm going to just go ahead and say, let's say we've got a row CB5 wall in front of me and I've got Brompton processing behind it. Okay.
Right.
You're going to have a lot of you're going to have handles on it. Some of the older processors, you have brightness and gamma. That's it. In some of these newer ones, you can now start to manipulate things a little bit better. Depending on your engineering infrastructure, it's not always the LED wall that has to change color temps, or that's not the only place that you can deal with it. I'm going to take an example. I was on a show last November in Las Vegas. I had my dead center wall was a Unilumen 3 mil wall, and the rest of the world, 9 more LED walls were row CB5 walls. I also had 2 separate processing infrastructures because of the different brands. When it all came, so we were trying to get everything to match. I had 3 things fighting against me in that scenario. One, the blacks in a row product, your CB5s, your CB3s, they're not matchable with another product. The black levels on a row product are going to be far deeper. So your image in the center, their blacks are not going to be as pronounced or defined. Now you can back off the blacks on row, but you don't really, there's only so far you can go without making basically the picture look like crap. And now you've gone the other way, right? Now you haven't solved anything. The second thing working kind of against me was that the Unilumin product will air green, and the CB5 is going to air warmer. What that does is when you toss a blue or an indigo up, I have a teal wall in the middle and blue periwinkle walls on the outside. And that doesn't work, not when it's a scrolling B-roll of the city of London under a blue wash for walk-in. That's not an end product that anybody, myself included, can be happy with. What we wound up doing is we got as far as we could with the LED, and I wound up taking a walk back to the D3 operator, had him throw a layer over that center wall. And granted, I was pretty close to doors at this point. He can then start to manipulate the blues. So we had to use a combination at that point. I got as far as I could with the walls. I couldn't go any farther. So I wound up having to go to the D3 guy. Yeah.
Where do you end up working with the LD to maybe have them change their color temperature to work better with your color temperature, or vice versa?
Honestly, that's where the whole, when they are focusing, the LED team needs to be present. One of the things that's important is we also have a handle on brightness. Normally with these newer products, you start it relatively low. You started at like a 30% or less. I've had to pull walls back to 22% or 8% at some point, in order to not wash that poor speaker out and challenge the lighting guy to just have to blast this guy. That's where you're going to see LED and the LED team and the lighting designer work together, is because your stage wash is the most important piece of square footage on stage. So it has to be perfect, and that's where LED has to come to the table with versatility, and that brightness handle is where you can grab it.
Yeah. Also in my experience, a lot of times the lighting people are the LED people. I mean, if you're working with light switch or unlimited visibility, very often they're providing not the hardware, not the LED hardware, but the LED content. A lot of, I mean, they're very involved in the LED from the get-go.
Exactly. And, great collaborators are, because, the more we all know this, the more you catch at the front end, the better off you are. So I always love it when the LD comes straight to my LED lead and they have a discussion. That's one of and if it doesn't happen, typically I walk the LED guy over to the lighting designer and say, hey, you two should chat.
You also don't need to have 4K all the time. I was on a show where the upstage wall of the set, which was 150 feet from the front row of the audience, the LEDs were 1.5 inches apart. It was like a screen like this that they just unrolled and pulled up. And from the front row of the audience, it looked like 4K.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, a lot of times you see those, you see headline banners that are just made up of LED strips, that there's maybe 6 inches between each strip. And yet when they put motion video across it, your mind just fills in the blanks.
Yeah.
Sure,
and you still see it as a continuous band, even though it's not.
Yes, exactly. I mean, our mind processes imagery somewhat slower than it's generated. So there's a little bit of that plays to your benefit if you need to use a lower pitch or a farther, a cheaper or whatever, a lower pitch wall. The biggest concern that I, as a video kid, has is who's going to be on stage, how close they're going to be to it, and how many times am I having to pick that guy up on IMAG? Because if I got to pick him up on IMAG in front of a 24 mil wall, that guy better be 50 feet away from it.
Yeah, they're usually just used for backdrops. No IMAG in the show I was on was ever done that far up. It was done on higher pitch ones, which were right on the sides of the stage.
Yeah, I mean, you get a 3 mil wall behind a speaker, and that guy can go anywhere between, as long as he stays as long as he stays farther away than about 10 feet. 10 to 15 feet is where you kind of have that gray area. But the lower the pitch, the farther away he's got to be for that moire to go away.
Does power ever have an issue with LEDs? Do you ever find that power is a problem? AC power?
So there's a couple of things I can speak to on this one. One is I'm going to take it back to the auto show days, where we were dealing with Barco C5, and it was that 13,000 pound wall that I spoke about earlier. These tiles heat up, and what happens is the longer that wall is on, the warmer those tiles get. And in the Barco C5 days, your signal cables would get slippery; they'd fall out. So gravity became a big culprit to wall fails. There was a time where we ran the wall and had to do a press.
The connectors, saying the connectors would fall out?
Yeah. Yep, the interconnects. So the little foot-long cables that go from tile to tile to
Clever choice of connectors.
Yeah, right. But that was a thing back then. Now you've got locking ones that are they're not made of metal, they're more plastic. So their transmitters are even cooler, and the walls don't heat up that bad. So power is a big deal. I mean, same thing, you get these giant walls with an older product, and you're going to have 400 to 600 amps of 3-phase to feed it. Where these days, the same size wall, maybe 200 amps. So yeah,
You could run a sound system with 200 amps.
Exactly. Is there a rule of thumb how fine a pitch you need so that your video doesn't get moire patterns on it when you're shooting?
Not necessarily. That's going to get more into frame rate.
Yeah.
Your higher pitch walls, when you have a 24 frame, frames per second rate, you're not going to get that stutter that comes across. But if it's, you get up into a higher pitch wall, you're going to get that stutter across if you're doing a frame rate of 24.
So even in the lower pitch walls, it's not a video. If video is picking up the wall and moving, it's not an issue.
It doesn't tend to be. You're going to see it stutter a little bit, but again, you probably see it stutter in the video itself a little.
Do you have to make the video match the frame rate of the camera?
No,
No?
not your pre-recorded stuff. No.
Yeah.
Because then when typically you don't have IMAG live when playback's going. So your frame rates between camera and playback source don't need to be the same.
And if you're trying to set the audio video sync for playback, do you just use the valid sync at the beginning of the video, or do you have a method of calculating that, or does Kelly just say, I know that's 5 milliseconds, bango, I've got it?
You do need to look at the frame sync from the start, right? Always go to the source. But then you have to look at the frame rate all the way down to where typically your last stop before the LED processor or the fiber to going to the processor is your high-res switching system. So if you can find your difference between playback and high-res, you're a lot closer than if Kelly's taking a stab at it.
Is there anywhere in the video chain to look that up to know what your latency is?
To be honest, I don't know.
I mean,
there are sync generators, of course, but I don't know. I would have to do a little more research or call somebody smarter than me to ask that question.
Like a valid source.
You do still have call a friend option available to you right now.
That's why we're always standing by with 33.3 milliseconds of delay for
Exactly.
every single frame that somebody throws at us,
Yeah,
unless
I now
unless we're
just,
obviously at 60, in which case we're at 16, you know?
yeah, I just make in preferences the delay display be actually in frames, not in milliseconds, because
Exactly.
it dials up
You
much
know?
faster that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
and that's
there
an
are some
easy,
good tools out there for valid, you know, live is, Gary brought this up in the questions, right? And, personally, I've got two different things, so much of it comes down to where is that seat, right? That people perceive, and, TV, that's a little different, right? Because, that's something that's being shot, back in that, where am I finding that sync at? There are a couple different tests that I like to run, beyond the traditional clap test. I don't really enjoy the clap test anymore.
I see
Nobody
the
does.
The clap test would be more to get the sync into your prop, not so
Yeah.
much on the screen. But
Yeah.
does the countdown at the top of a playback sometimes work as a valid feed, or is that not too short to deal with?
you probably could.
There's a couple test
Yeah.
clips that
Yeah.
that I've used and seen, where gives you the time but the John Christie makes a point here. Yes, we need a video version of Smart for video walls. I had tested one of those devices where you held it up to the LED and it did the light pulse and the sound measurement. And there's a couple tools out there for trying to quantify that, which is, again, very much a challenge because in the situations where we're using it a lot from a live event standpoint, it really is that perception of, usually I find the boss and I take the boss with me to wherever and go, you want to call 0, all right? And do you like how it looks here? Good.
Yes.
We're gonna, now you explain it to everybody else that this is where it looks best.
Yeah.
Always a challenge.
Yeah, with timing the PA, when you're talking about an audience, I always figure that plus or minus one frame is in sync,
Right.
acceptably in sync.
Usually.
So that gives you 65 feet of audience depth that can be in sync at any time. And that's all you get, because once you go outside that 65 feet, you're now more than a frame out. And you just have to explain to the producer that they get 65 feet of audience depth that's going to have good lip sync, and they get to choose where that 65 feet is.
Yeah, if they want to be in the middle of the house.
200 feet
One
deep,
way to
they're
do
all
that,
going to
right?
have lip sync.
How many, obviously you don't have pitches in every, like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I mean, how many different pitches are available typically in the business?
The easy ones to find in products that you would deploy now, you've got anything from a 24 mil. There are some 11 mil products out there. They're a little older. You've got 8, 5, 3, 2, 1. I mean, you've got, when you get into the higher pitches, there's a few more options. And then they start to distance themselves out. Mac,
At what number do you get to when finally you're in an open air kind of LED wall that maybe audio will travel through?
That's when you're looking at like an 18 mil or higher wall. Your 18 mil wall is going to be semi see-through or translucent. Higher than 18 mil would be a product that both air, water, and sound can flow through freely. Lower than that, you're gonna, there's just too much stuff in the way.
I was on a Katy Perry tour where she had a triangle wall that was ground supported because it moved upstage and downstage. 3 parts of it moved. Lights came out from the side and everything. It took forever. It was 22 trucks just to carry the LED wall and the supporting thing. Then she changed to a wall that came out of a 6 foot by 12 foot roll, and they just rolled it up like this, and it was
Yep.
all in one truck.
And that I was just going to say, Mac, you're that's likely the type of wall. I mean, you can watch the text, pull them out. They look like curtains.
Yeah.
Real flexible, flimsy, somewhat see-through, but darn quick to toss up. That's for sure.
But not good close up.
You're not going to want to put a story on it. Flashy moving picture, maybe, but you know, your pixel distance is,
Yeah.
it's just going to be far more granular.
Yep. James Wilkins says, I read somewhere the NAB standard of acceptable lip sync is +1 to -2. Well, Mac is much more critical. He only does plus or minus 1.
I was going to say, I vote Mac's way.
Exactly. Where do old LED walls go to die? Are they out in some airport just parked on the tarmac like old planes?
It's in Tucson.
I was going to say, I actually do have a friend who I believe he's still full-time at Blue Water, but he's been in the auto show industry for probably going on almost 30 years now. So you can imagine the technological path he's seen or journey.
Yeah.
And he says that if he's rich when he retires, he wants to buy, he's got 4 products, and some of them are from, you know, like the late 90s and whatever. He wants to hire a group of people to go set them all up and make them perfect and beautiful in the middle of the desert, and then take machine guns and destroy them.
Uh-oh. The bunch of audio people will run the machine guns, I guess.
Well, then I might have a side job for you in a few years.
There we go. A. Michaels is asked, can you ask lighting to add or remove a contrasting color to fix the LED problems? I guess maybe the blue you're talking about.
Yeah, I guess when you're getting into some of those trickier colors, like, hey LD, could we not have a blue wash when I'm trying to fix, you know, in the same look? But at the same time, a lot of times the lighting fixtures and the LED walls, I mean, I've been in a situation where there's a Congo blue out on the audience and the walk-in colors are blue, and it doesn't appear to look to the human eye as though it's affecting one another. It just, one is completely environmental and the other is completely scenic. So the mind's eye is taking them in differently for one. And at that point, everything's blue. So really,
and again,
when it comes
on a big show, the LED people and the lighting people are definitely working together. They're not, this is not two departments that aren't talking to each other. This is two departments that are intimately connected.
Yeah, and where church really meets state with those two concentrations is that center wash. Is how do we make LED and lighting play so that, you know, the topper of the cake, right? That little the stage wash is actually the star of the show, not the wall or the lights making the wash.
Right. Is there sort of a Moore's law for LED walls? Do they increase in resolution every X years? Do they double in resolution every 5 years? Something like that. Like Moore's law doubles the number of transistors on a chip every 2 years.
Gotcha. The short answer is I don't think so. I mean, we're getting to the point now where you've put the pixels as close as you physically can to each other. And so now how do you make that tile itself more, it's more in how the wall is processed, how the images are processed, what handles you have in the software.
So the improvement is making it lighter and easier and more flexible,
Yes.
not in putting more pixels together. Because once you've got,
yeah, because I mean, once you're a millimeter apart, putting them any closer, it's going to be 2 pixels, 2 atoms come together and make a molecule.
Right.
You know, so
a few years ago at NAB, somebody was demonstrating a video wall tile with a 0.5 millimeter pitch.
Yep.
And friends of mine who saw it said that you could stand right in front of it and it looked like you were looking at an HD monitor.
Yeah,
It's
and
very hard to see those LEDs. You have to literally be so close. Yeah.
yeah, I would say what's coming next is very similar to a Sony product that I know, gear vendor wise, I think LMG is the only vendor that owns it, is the OLED, which is in and of itself an unbelievably awesome product.
Yep.
It's an experience to see anything on an OLED wall. But that's where, you know, if tiles themselves are going to improve, that's where you're going to see it. You're going to see them get lighter. You're going to see them get easier to manipulate. You know, again, like I said, the more dated processing, you had gamma and brightness. That's it. So you can yank on those two all you want.
Yeah.
Now you look at inside the guts of a Brompton software system and you understand you've got 5 or 6 different things you can handle. So
yeah. John Christie, I don't know where he is. He must be at the zoo or something, because he says there's an elephant in the room about RF interference from the walls. My experience is the RF interference is gone now. There on new products, there is no measurable RF interference, and I've gone out and done it. I was asked by Claire Brothers, before they hired an LED wall company to do a tour, to go out and measure the prospects that have offered a bid to them. And I went out and I measured a system at VER, and I measured a system at Tate, and I couldn't get any increase in RF noise level with my antenna touching the screen as opposed to 10 feet away. Power on, power off, nothing. Now, when I went to the back of the screen, I got about 10 dB of noise level touching the screen, but in the front, it was virtually gone. So I think they've learned their lesson. They don't send one tile to the FCC to be measured now. They at least send out a real wall to be measured. I think that problem really has gone away.
Well, and some of the older ones, and this is to another question I saw there, Pete and Mac, that Mark had about the longevity of an LED wall in inventory, you know. So exactly. I guess the question I would ask first is how long can I use these walls for? You know, how long, what's that typical lifespan?
It really depends on the product. That's kind of where my opinion lies. You know, you're going to have a lot of vendors that are going to do the 5.8.3s, you know, the 3.8.5s. One, because those are real versatile walls. You can use them in a lot of different ways. They're not going anywhere anytime soon. Many of them have been designed to be quickly built and easily programmed. So, you know, you can sell them to tours, you can sell them to expo, you can sell them in an install even if you wanted to. A lot of times a gear vendor, what they will do with an outdated product is put it in a market that might slightly be behind where, you know, their hottest new tickets are being sold.
Yeah.
A wise, you know, same thing with PA. You know, it's you don't throw away the stuff that still works for breakout rooms if you're buying a brand new PA that you want to use on the 30,000 person arena show. You know, sell them both. These days, these newer LED products are easier to maintain and maintenance. They're stored better. They're easier to fix.
I'd be willing to bet that a permanent install LED walls have more noise.
Their makeup noise. These days it's cheap to fix. So you know,
we lost you there for a minute, Beth. But I was saying permanent install, like in Times Square. Now we've lost Beth altogether. Probably have more noise level than touring ones. They can get away with it because it's not a problem. So I guess Beth is going to log back on, and then we'll have.
Yeah, no, her mic is still on.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there. Now I can hear you. I lost audio for a second. Sorry, guys. So Peter.
It's Friday in the internet. you know, is
Exactly.
Yeah.
the internet's already starting its weekend early.
Yeah. But anyway, as far as the lifespan of a piece of inventory, it's a lot like all the other gear. However, LED is becoming far more easy to maintain, maintenance, repair, keep up, or replace. The other nice thing about a lot of the new LED products is you can mix and match processing to LEDs, to LED tiles. So your inventories can be a little bit more versatile as well.
Have you done any shows using LED that mimic the effect of mapping projections onto buildings, and you can have that same effect of parts of it? You did, Mac?
Kind
Yeah.
of.
We did a show 2 years ago, I think, at MGM Grand Arena in late August for a computer hardware company, that the entire arena floor was LED floor, both the stage and the audience. The audience was sitting on the LED wall, and then that was just on what would be the hockey floor at the MGM, and then the audience up in the bowl had LED, high-powered LED pixel elements over their shoulders that were mounted to the arena chairs. There was like 10,000 of those wired to the chairs, and yeah, the whole thing was mapped.
So you saw the floor pop up in the middle, which was basically just a projection of it popping up in the middle. Nice,
Yeah.
nice. So
Yeah, you're gonna get a lot of that with floor, a lot of that mapping or that experiential graphic work. You can do a lot of things creatively with those floors.
Yeah.
So replacing physical sets is it's much more flexible than building a physical set.
Mm-hmm.
Short of having a pop-up table in the middle of the floor that actually supports your glass of water, but
Right.
they're getting to that.
Yeah, we haven't quite, as I mentioned, I think in my intro, one of my gigs is doing a late night talk show when they go on remotes, and it used to be a 3-day load in to load in the set that was all wood, all had to match the set that was in the studio, and nothing could happen really while the set was loading in because you couldn't fly things in and out because the set was in the way. And now the last time we did it, it was completely LED wall, wraparound LED wall with a slider upstage center so the talent could enter and so that we could slide band carts down for guest artists.
Yeah.
And the load in took less than a day and took up way less room. Of course, the road cases took up a awful lot of room
Most
backstage.
Yeah.
But yeah, it went up much faster, and and while RF doesn't really go through the screen, we knew in advance the screen was going to be there, and the RF coordinator had antennas backstage so that we could check mics backstage and antennas out in front of the screen so we could, get RF in front of the screen.
Both, right?
Yeah, and it was fantastic, and I think that was only on the last one we did. I can't imagine them going back to a wooden set to go out on remotes for again.
Sure. I want to qualify my John Christie comment that I made. There are a lot of bad RF walls still out there, and you have to be careful about being around them. Know in advance and see if you can test them in advance. I did 2 years of a tour with John McGraw and Faith Hill, where the entire floor of the stage, which covered the entire floor of a hockey arena, was the worst wall you could ever imagine. Easily 10 dB of noise floor across the entire band. And the only way we were able to get the ears to work is we dropped down ear transmitter antennas to within 2 feet above the performer's head from the grid, and pumped 100 milliwatts into them to get their mics, their ears to work. And when they walked away from those, they basically didn't work. So we had to live with it. It was a terrible situation. Second year, they replaced all of the BNC connectors with TNC, which dropped the noise floor almost totally away. So it was the same piece of equipment. And then the third year, they put in different power supplies, and it was much, much, much better. So they learned. But again, you have to go into any show where you're doing an LED wall with your spectrum analyzer and a grain of salt, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I have a question.
yep.
What is the difference of a tile that's used for a wall versus what's used for a floor, right?
The strength of
Is
what
it the
you're
same
putting in front of it.
technology?
Same thing, same
Okay.
thing. So actually, the Tate has some very nice floors that have like a half-inch plexi that go on top of them, but the floors are only 4-inch tiles, and they're magnetically held, and you don't have to unplug anything. You just pop it out, pop it in.
Yep.
It's just a cute little 4-inch thing, and it just pops in. They're all connected to the back plane that way, and you can easily pull the top off, pop a bad thing out, put another one, and continue.
Yep.
But the ones
Yeah.
on Tim McGraw and Faith Hill were 250-pound frames that had they're really lousy thing in them with 3/4-inch plexi on top of them. So
Yeah.
it was a massive install for the crew.
Yep. And your older floors are going to be like that, but Peter, just like tiles themselves, floors have come a long way as well. So that one on the tour was probably one of the first LED floors. Back in the day when we used to put lights under the stages, now we're putting LED under the stages. And that newer Tate structure is far easier to install and far easier to maintain as well.
So you mentioned about swapping tiles, both Pete and Beth. I think there is a question related to that, Pete, correct? Because I'm always curious when I see tile swaps going on, what's involved with that. I usually think it's a good opportunity to work on audio, because then nobody's waiting on audio. But,
on the newer systems, how hard is it to color match them when you have to swap a tile?
Not hard. Most of the tiles these days have their own native file.
Each tile has its own color correction built in.
So your goal is before this tile even leaves the shop, they leave already.
Okay, well,
That makes sense.
Tile.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a little while.
There we go.
Okay.
There we go.
how about?
Edward Willock mentions floor tiles are almost always IP65, which also has a water component. Plexiglass topper take more consideration for wiring, and the connections are not accessible like a vertical wall, unless of course that the wall is not the stage where you can walk underneath it. Tim McGraw and Faith Hill, wasn't that performance video for the LED? I don't quite know what that means.
I think he's asking about the company that provided it.
No, it was not. That's all I'm going to say about it, because I don't like their floor.
How about augmented reality and Bethany with related to augmented reality with some of these other technologies out there? I think John may have mentioned Disguise as well.
Well, Mac was talking about augmented reality.
Yeah.
I was?
Yeah, on the floor for your show.
Well,
augmented
it's not really
reality,
augmented reality.
which is augmented just looking at it.
Yeah.
But seriously, Bethany, do you have any experience with the walls, especially into with today's popularity of augmented and virtual reality and using those in conjunction? Or is it
I have a little.
generally?
I have a little.
Mhm.
The bottom line is whatever is generating the augmented reality or whatever that system is, you know, connect it to the bright shiny thing and let it show the picture. There are some products out there,
Yeah.
but generally speaking, there was a kind of an experiential expo floor that I did where the LED wall is standing in front of you and their augmented reality or their virtual reality software system, whatever, they incorporated this small wall into a series of the shipping containers. And so right above the wall was a shelf on that shipping container where they put the piece of technology that does what the augmented reality thing does. And back behind the scenes, they connect it to the giant shiny thing, and poof, you've got a instead of a TV, it's an LED wall. You know, in the end, it's a big screen. So as long as you can have connectivity between the brain doing the thing and the thing showing what the brain's doing, you're off to the races.
Yeah, and John, I think I'll speak from an event I did this past summer where we had a very large LED wall and vehicles, and they put an augmented reality. We had a shot of the vehicle with up on the LED screen, additional, like in this case, it was a shot of the car with a jet fighter plane that you only saw in the LED screen above it. And then when the car rotated, the augmented reality showed like the powertrain system, and it showed the aspects overlaid. So in that case, I would say it was actually very successful, because while I was sitting in the room and I could see that a fighter jet was not sitting next to it, and I could see that all of these animations were not moving on the car, it worked really well for me, because I would look up there and I could see, and I was pretty amazed with the technology, because as the car would rotate, it actually kept the geometric scale of it, and it was quite impressive. I must say, even for an audio guy, I had to give them some significant kudos for their production. Let's see, and that, but of course, that was after we had dropped two boxes off the hang to lighten up the load, because the LED wall was so heavy. Did I say that before, that LED walls are really heavy and they usually mean that I have to cut a couple boxes? All right, sorry.
I thought you meant a couple of boxes of the LED wall you dropped off.
No, I wouldn't.
You know, you know, sometimes the LED walls are really heavy, which means you're going to have to drop a couple boxes, Kelly.
It's part of the trade-off. And in this case, it's worth every pound that I drop to see the actual end result of the show. And it was just the scale that you get to, you know, appreciate. Now, I don't mind that. You guys seeing any other ones here?
Not really, but we're pretty much caught up on all the questions. There's some repeats of them. You know, Edward is mentioning that same thing Beth said about the single modules typically have their config file built onto each one, so they're color matched up front.
Yeah, and I saw the note that Yamaha does typically reference everything to 30 frames, so you just have to do the math in your head if you're running at 60, right? If you were trying to match up to that. Let's see, slower devices.
I don't quite know how slower devices would help your sync at all. We want faster.
Well, processors. I think we're talking about latency in the whole chain, right? That some of the older products have higher processing time versus newer products have a lower processing time. So my latency would be lower, and you know, my delay obviously then.
I mean, it's lower latency, not lower speed for the device.
No, it a higher speed device, and not
Right.
frame rate or anything, just how it operates, right? It can do more. Any devices don't like to see, make models, those kind of things, I think was the question. And maybe we can take that offline because we never know who wants to come and speak on.
Yeah.
We try to be very judicious about being too specific because a lot of things are in context, right? An older wall might be a great financial value for a production company, right? And so that's why we have a matrix system, right? And antennas. We have opportunities to work around that, get a little more money in our RF budget. I did like John's idea of a Faraday cage to go over the back of LED walls to help contain some of that noise. There's opportunity there because so
Yeah.
how long these walls are going to be out in the field? Probably pretty long time, even the older ones.
On the
Yeah,
Tim
they're
McGraw
a big investment.
on the Tim McGraw and Faith Hill tour, where we had such a noise thing, we did some experimentation, and there was a black rubber mat that was around all the LEDs, and we took the black rubber mat out and replaced it with wires that we then soldered all together and grounded, and all the noise went away. Well, we weren't going to do that with the whole floor, but it just meant we were shielding it better. So I think that
Yeah.
some of the technology that they're probably already doing, but I think 90% of the noise is coming from leakage of the video and or the power supply.
At the connector.
I was on tour in France, and we'd been on tour for about 6 weeks already in Europe. And we pull into this venue, and I get out of the bus in the morning, and I go and I take my spectrum analyzer and sit out in the house and turn it on, and bingo, every 20 megahertz there's this big pile, all the way from 400 to 700. Every 20 megahertz, this pile of noise. And I figured it was something outside the venue. So I took my spectrum analyzer, walked outside the venue, bango, it went away. Walked back inside the venue, came right back. And I mentioned it to the production manager, and he said, well, this is serious. Erskine never comes to me about any problems, ever. So if he's coming to me with a problem, we got a problem. So we got the people.
He always comes to me with a problem.
Exactly. We got the house to turn off the video wall. They had the video they have in the center. What do they call those?
Scoreboard.
The
Scoreboards?
scoreboard. Yeah. Got them to turn
Jumbotron,
off,
yeah.
including the power supply, and bingo, it went away. Well, of course, we had to use it because that was a key part of the show. They wanted to use that for IMAG. So all I did was I treated each one of these little piles of noise every 20 megahertz as a TV channel, put them in my Spectrum, in my IAS coordination software as a TV channel, and put all of the mics in between each of those 20 megahertz piles. Luckily in France, virtually nobody transmits over there anyway, so there was no other TV around. But it was one of the worst RF from power supply that I've ever seen.
Mm.
So I think we Mark Kennedy
Seeing
said
some ideas come in though, so that's good.
Yeah.
how to do a site
Good,
survey.
thanks
Very
for-
good. Okay, that's definitely.
This is good. It's provoking some thoughts. I appreciate that.
Yeah, we could have
And,
Kelly on and have him talk about how to do a site survey.
Kelly just did a site survey yesterday.
Hey, curved screens. Anything special about curved screens versus straight screens?
The level of patience it takes to put them together.
That one looked
How
pretty
much?
crazy. The
how
roller
much-
coaster.
The actual tiles don't curve, do they?
Yes, they
No,
do.
there's well, some of them do, yes. In that in the Cadillac booth, they did not. There's a bracket that you
You're kind of frozen and
swap
pixelated.
out on the side of the
Yeah.
tile to allow them to come together at a certain degree, concave or convex.
Right.
That same show that I talked about with the
Yeah, let me try it
floor,
that way. Yes.
that same show that I talked about with the floor this year had 8 16 by 61 foot screens, LED screens in a circle around the mid-level of the MGM Grand Arena. And with so it was 4 screens around
Yeah.
the arena on the outside, and then 4 more on the inside, so that you could see the back of the, there's images on
Yeah.
the front and backs. And those tiles all were curved or could curve. The
Yeah.
actual tile,
Yeah.
the
A lot
actual
of the,
tile would bend.
yes, the
That
tile
was,
does bend. Most of them will bend in 2 spots.
yeah, that was a brand new LMG. That, in fact, most of the walls came off the truck in the cardboard box they got shipped from the manufacturer, and there weren't even road cases for them yet. It was,
Right. Right.
they came, there was,
Hot off the press, as it were.
yeah, it was at least 2 53-foot trucks of tiles.
Yeah. Yeah, there are
Mhm.
products out there where the tile itself will bend. There are tiles that won't bend at the tile, that you then use those brackets or those couplers to start to make an arc or a concave or convex curve.
Yeah, that circular wall was actually pretty amazing, because it not only flew up and down, but 4 of the tiles in the corners also tracked. And they tracked all the way in and lowered down to enclose the stage to reveal the artist, and then tracked back up.
Oh, I
to
bet
make
that was cool.
That was a pretty cool
Yeah.
effect.
When using different kinds of video like SDI versus HDMI to feed your screens, obviously you have to scan convert them to fit on your screen. That eats up a little bit of latency right there.
It does, yeah. And there's lots of schools of thought between, you know, there are processors that can take either or. There are some that take DVI. You just have to build in, yes, the latency, but then understand whatever you decide to use, cabling wise, is how it's also going to affect the picture. Because your blacks are different on SDI versus HDMI. Your black scale is much different. So.
One thing I noticed and I've always wondered about is I come in this giant screen up there and they're all very obsessively numbered in there. So obviously you know where they are. Is that done automatically, or did somebody with an OCD complex go in and actually put in each number on each tile?
No. The processors have a lot like bars in a video switching system. Your processor has that as well.
It
So
figures out. So when you put the tile in, it sort of figures out itself what number it's supposed to be.
Well, that's yes, if you've wired it correctly. So that's one reason why they put it up. If the grid is wrong or the numbers aren't right, you've wired your wall wrong, if that makes sense.
So it's the order of the interconnects. You have to interconnect what from the header straight down every column or something like that. Yeah.
Right. Yes. And so let's say you're looking at a giant wall in front of you. It could, engineering wise behind it, it's actually wired to be 3, 5, or 7 different walls, because processors can only handle so many tiles a piece. So you divide the walls up by in chunks.
And then when you take, then you have to tell the processors they have this pixel to this pixel in the video stream, or
yeah, this is where screen control, your high-res screen control and your LED guys are going to talk about what hoses are going between and how many and which one goes where, and you know, how many lines of fiber is it, how many strands of glass is it, that kind of thing.
And that's a little introduction to Beth's upcoming show on how all the electronics work.
I'm down.
Exactly. Cool.
Yeah, we've gotten some, we talked about this already, time code, frame rates, but you know, other topics are the interconnect, right? The video that we have a very intricate relationship between audio and video. And a lot of times you know, it's become very siloed. And that, so hence the reason we wanted to have this discussion, and hopefully many more video discussions to come to understand, you know, what we need to accomplish, what you're trying to accomplish. You know, any closing thoughts, Mac, Pete, Bethany, anybody? We're good. I think we've gotten through this.
We've even talked about the elephant. Exactly.
We even talked about the Canadian elephant also.
Exactly. Way
Which I
different
guess
than an American elephant.
it's a very different element, right, John?
Their trunk
knows
is
what I
called
mean.
something else up
Which
in
one
Canada.
has the big ears and which one has the small ears?
Right.
I just want to
up in-
know, I just want you to know, John, we love everybody up north there. I'm from, you know, Illinois, so you're a little further north of me.
Up in Canada, this is called the boot.
My elephant wears a parka, he says. So there you go. Anyhow, thanks so much for being on, Bethany, and I look forward to seeing you in the field. Probably going to be a couple more weeks. I'll be honest. I'm trying to be really optimistic.
Pete,
But-
is that you trying to call up a screen there? Yeah.
Yes,
It's
I
going to
am.
be a little longer, but you know, let's stay optimistic. Let's stay in touch, and
Yep.
Let's
come
continue
up
to
with
submit
ways.
ideas for the next few minutes.
Yeah. Meanwhile,
Yeah,
we're
we're
going to
doing that.
sign off while you know, for today, and we'll be back. We're taking Monday off with pay. Okay, Pete, Mac, Monday, you get the day off with pay. All right. So
Amazing.
turn in your time sheet now, and you know, be watching because we're going to come back on Wednesday with Sony digital wireless mics. We're going to be joined by those folks, and then on Friday with RF Venue and Chris, and obviously they've been very busy on the interwebs, right, with everything, and we managed to find a couple very specific topics to talk to them about. So make sure you check out our website. Sign up early, sign up often. So meanwhile,